Welcome everyone. We're ready for our Christmas in July Quilt-A-Long project, and I'd like to welcome you today. We're going to be going through a lot of the introductory part of this project and sharing some different options for you to participate in. So I would like to first of all I'd like to first let you know where you can get the supply list. It is on the Sew Steady site, and this is the supply list right here. This is a copy of that, and you can get that supply list also on my website, and that is sewbizmarion.com. And when you go there, you will scroll down and you will see the Quilt-A-Long symbol, or the thing that you've been getting in emails this week. And when you click on that, there will be information there as to how you can get that supply list. So what we are going to be needing is a ½ yard of your main fabric and cornerstones. You're going to use a yard of fabric for your backing and borders. And I'm going to have the camera turn around and show the project so you can see what we're going to be making. We're going to be using the Spinifex number 14, which is one of the new templates. And it uses 3 of the sizes. Now you can purchase them individually, or you can purchase them as a set. There are 5 in the set. The 3 that we're going to be using are the 11.5 inch, the 9.5 inch, and the 3.5 inch. So as I said, it's a set of 5. You can also get those from your local Westerly location where they sell the templates. Or again, if you're like 4 hours from a store, there are websites. My website has them on them too. So remember that a sew-along is not necessarily something that you're doing right now with me. You can see what we're doing today. You can order the products, and you can watch next week, and then you can just follow along because these are all archived. So don't fret if you don't have these templates. You can get them ordered and you'll be able to make this. Remember, it's a Christmas project, so we've got plenty of time to complete this before Christmas. So I'd like to thank our sponsors today. Westerly Designs, they're the maker of the templates and obviously the rulers that I'm going to be using for cutting. SewBiz, that's my company, and June Taylor, that's where we are using different products. This time we're going to be using quilt basting spray. Arrow cabinets, and oh my goodness you guys, I can't believe it, they're going to be giving away one of these large cutting mats. I believe it's 40 by 46. And so they're going to be giving away one of these cutting mats, so you definitely want to share, comment, enter to win. You know how that goes. If this is your first time joining us, I'd sure like to welcome you along. It's been a lot of fun. So you can share this with your friends. We'd like to know where you're watching from. Give us a little information. Give us a thumbs up, a love. We love that stuff too. So Arrow Cabinets is donating that, and they are going to be giving that away this week. And then also Sew Steady, because Sew Steady is the one that brings this all to us. So we thank all of those sponsors for joining us for our sew-along. So now I've mentioned that we're using this Spinifex. I want to remind you that when you order your templates, you need to know whether you have high shank or low shank. And if you've never done the ruler work, you would need to check to see what ruler foot you do need for your project. So make sure that you're ordering the right thing when you're ordering those templates. You can also order the kits, and I want to show you the colorways. If you want to get your own fabric, that's perfectly fine. If you would like to get kits, you can order the kits individually. And if you're a store and you would like to teach this class in your store, you can contact us about ordering the kits in quantities at a better price so that you can use them in your store. So the one I'm going to use today is the red with the metallic and a bone for our solid. So those are the 2 that I'm going to cut for today, but there are other options. And so I'm going to show you those right now. We have an option of a green. It's a hunter green. It's a real rich hunter green, and it has a light, very light silver metallic in it. We have put that with white. So if you did this and then you wanted to use either green or red for your thread, obviously you'd have something really pretty going on there. One of the other color combinations is a gold. Now this may show up kind of a hazy green on the camera because I noticed when we took the picture for the website kits, it didn't show up that pretty. But this is a very rich gold with a minimal amount of metallic in it, and we're putting that with, and this is only for color representation because this has little dots. Our bone fabric is scheduled to arrive later this afternoon, but this is the color we're putting with. It's called champagne. So when you see these little dots, the kit will not have that color. And then another one of our fabrics is this particular little ivy print that brings the red and the green and the metallic together. And we're also putting that with the champagne. So if you're ordering kits from us, those would be your options. You'll see those also on our website. So again, we have the red and green with the little holly leaves. We have the gold with the champagne color. And then we're having the option of the green with white. And then the one I'm going to use today is a bone with a red with metallic. So let's check and see if we have any questions before we get started on our cutting. So if you have a question, please make sure you put that on there so we can answer it as we go. That's the fun part of Facebook Live. Okay, so since we have no questions, I'm going to proceed. And I'm first of all going to use my 1/2 yard of fabric. And so I'm going to talk you through, for some of you, you're just getting started with this quilting. And I want to give you as much information as I possibly can. So I want to have a good look at our fabric here. This is a 1/2 yard of fabric. It's folded in half so that we have the selvages over here at the side. So I'm one that when I purchase fabric, I like to have it torn. That's a whole nother lesson, but when you do that, you're getting a good straight edge there. So this up here was actually a torn edge. This over here is the selvage. We do not want to use either the torn or the selvage in our quilt. So we're going to be cutting that off. So in the case of this particular fabric, I need to cut a 16 3/4 inch square. So I'm going to take my fabric and I am going to open it up because I only need one of those 16 1/4 inch squares. So I'm folding this up so that I get this nice and flat. Now I know that over here I've got this straight. This was a cut edge. That was a torn edge. I'm going by the torn edge. So for those of you that buy your fabric cut with a rotary cutter, yours might perfectly match up there, and that's okay, but I know that I want to go and get my grain perfectly straight. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this edge over here right on a straight edge, and I'm going to set this one on a line also. So I hope that you can see right down here at the bottom, that's a straight line, and this is a straight line as well. So I'm going to lay my main fabric out of the way, and I'm going to get one of my rulers. Now I keep my rulers in a nice little ruler rack here. So this is one of my Westerly design rulers, and for this I'm going to just use the edge to cut. So I'm going to set this right along this direction, and I'm going to line up and cut off a 1/2 inch because I want to make sure that I get my selvage off of there. Now if your selvage is a little wider, you may want to cut off 3/4, and that's what it looks like right here that I need to do. So I'm going to take that rotary cutter, I'm pressing on this, and I'm going to cut that right off. So now I have this edge is cut perfectly to what I need to use. Now, in order to, I should have started with this flipped over this way. In order to get this so you can see everything, I'm going to come right down here to that line, and I'm going to smooth this out. So again, I've turned this around, but the same thing, this is straight here, and this is straight across the bottom this way. So I'm going to be taking, well, that wasn't good. We'll try that again. For those of you that didn't see it the first time, you'll see it the second time. So I've got this nice and flat this way and as well that way. And I need this to be 16 3/4. So since this ruler is longer than that, or is not as long to get this completely in, I'm just going to come down here to 16 3/4 and use the lines on my ruler. So I'm matching that up here, so I'm getting the 16 3/4. This is the beauty of having a table mat that is large enough that we can do this. So I'm going to cut this right along there, and I'm going to lay this aside. Now, if you remember right, I said we needed it to be a square. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to lay this out flat. At this point, I'm going to get this on, and I don't like to cut a square folded up. I like to have it laying out nice and flat. So I'm going to put this again on that 16 3/4, and some of you are saying, well, no, that's 36. Well, yes, it is, because of the fact that I have that on a 20 to start. So there's my 16 3/4 that way, and I'm coming down to this end, and now I have cut off a perfect 16 3/4 inch square. Now the next step for this will be pressing this with best press, because I'm going to be making markings on here, and if you haven't heard me talk about it, when I put best press on this and then make markings with the Frixon markers, they will iron right out because I've created a barrier. So I'm just going to turn around and lay this on my ironing board. We'll get back to it in a second. Now we also need out of that fabric 4 5-inch squares. So all I'm going to do is continue with this fabric, and I'm going to show you how this ruler is so nice and working in that way. So what I'm going to do is, whether you have the, I'm actually going to use my narrower one. I have the 6 1/2 here. So since I need 5 inches, I'm going to unscrew this and unscrew this one right here. And you will see, if you were doing a lot of strip cutting, this is going to make it nice and easy. Can you see how I've lined that right up with that 5-inch line? There's a line right there, and I'm going to tighten this screw, and I'm going to come down here and raise this to 5 inches and tighten that. So what that is a little elevation on the back, so that when I line this up, I really don't have to have anything on the front to match up exactly, and I'm purposefully doing this a little crooked so you get the idea. So there's my perfect 5 inches, and I'm going to cut that one, and I know because this was a 1/2 yard that the only way I'm going to get 5 of them is to cut another strip. So I'm going to take that, line that up, and you can see it just stays right there. There's no slipping. And now I have that. I'm going to layer this one with this one. And just as a little hint, when I turn this around here, even though I may feel like I've got this perfectly layered, I'm going to trim off just a smidge, because then that way I know I did have it perfectly layered. So I'm lining this up. I'm going to take this is right along that line, and I'm just going to cut off just a little bit right here. And then I'm going to use that ruler to its greatest advantage. Line that right up. Come across there. I've got a 5-inch square. I need 4 of them. That fabric was only like 18 inches long. That's why I couldn't get 2 of them across there. So now I have 4 pieces that are going to be my cornerstones. And we're going to be pressing those in a moment also. So that's all we need to cut out with of that particular fabric. So I'm going to lay that aside, and I'm going to get my main fabric, which is a yard of fabric. And for this fabric, I like to cut the biggest pieces first. Think about how you're going to be using it. I need a 30-inch square. So I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to fold it back on itself, so this being my selvage matches. This is my selvage along here. And then we're going to measure over after we cut off that selvage edge. Do we have any questions? Anybody have any questions so far?
No questions, but lots of love for the rulers.
All right, that's great. If you've not seen these, this is what made Bill and Leonie famous. Is when they first got started was the rulers. So we're really liking the rulers. Just getting used to them. After you've started with them, you're going to love them yourself. So I'm going to put this again up on a line on my cutting mat. And I'm going to use just the edge of my ruler. Whoops, it looks like I could go ahead and fold it again. So that's what I'm going to do. You could fold it completely up there, or you can just fold it once, part way. So I'm going to come over here, and again, I'm cutting off at least a 1/2 inch for the selvage. So I'm coming across there. Some of you probably noticed I'm sitting down to do the video, and when I cut, usually I'm standing up, and so you have more. You never want to seesaw with your ruler or with your rotary cutter. You don't want to seesaw back and forth. You just want one good cut. So that's what we have there. And I said 30, and I'm actually on the 20. So on the 20 mark, you want to show them that, Megan, down at the bottom there? That's the 20-inch mark, and so I'm using that, and I like to use the whole numbers. It makes my thinking a little easier. And I'm going to come clear down here to my 50 and line up my ruler. And now I've cut that across. Now, if you think about this, this was a yard of fabric. So if it's a yard of fabric, it probably means that I'm going to be cutting off about 6 inches. So I'm refolding this so that I have it nice and flat, being my torn edge. I want to get everything out there. And it doesn't matter that's the torn edge, because that's what we're going to be turning back. In this class, I'm going to show you how you can turn your front, or your back to your front to create a faux binding. So I'm going to put this down here at the 20, and again come clear down here to the 50. And that is about 6 inches that I'm cutting off. So I'm going to take that off of there. So this is going to be my backing. This is my 30 by 30 inch. And I will press it. I don't necessarily need to, I'm not going to make any markings, so I don't need to necessarily use the best press on that for a barrier, but it will be nice to be able to use that to press out any and all of my creases. So this is the rest of what we have, and let's look at what we've got here. We've still got a selvage. I always like to know where I'm at on my fabric. In other words, know what you've got, know where the strength is, because there's really more strength in the length. So just little things like that. So what I'm going to need right now is 4 border pieces that are 5 inches wide by 16 3/4. So I'm going to come right here and put this on a straight edge. And again, line this up to cut off that selvage. So we've got that cut off, and here again we can use this great feature of the Westerly Design ruler to get our 5 inch, and you can see it just doesn't move. Come again and get our 5 inch. So now I need to cut this in 16 3/4 inch segments. So I'm just going to layer this up. And do it all at once. Now I'm one of those people that I measure twice. Maybe not, you don't actually see that, but in my mind I'm looking at it twice to make sure I've got it where I want it. I'm coming down here and I'm cutting off these raw edges, whether they be torn or they be cut edges. So I have a perfectly smooth edge there. And then in this case, this being the 5 inch and this ruler is 18 inches long, this is nice to be able to bring this in. Here's 16, 16 and a half, and right there is 16 3/4. So I'm going to be able to lay this right up against that edge, right there at that 16 3/4, and down here on the other end, I can just cut that off. So now I have my 4 border strips, one nice cut, 5 inches by 16 3/4. Now I went ahead and cut the batting. So I've got the batting cut, and it's a 27 inch square. This is a piece of Quilter's Dream Request. Whatever weight you want to use or whatever batting is fine. I would encourage you never to iron your batting. Some people I've heard say, oh, I always iron my batting. Batting's really not designed to be ironed. So if you have creases in it like that, you're just going to kind of press them out with your hands, not with an iron. So we'll be using that in just a moment to get all set up.
We have a question.
What is our question?
Where can they get more info on the rulers?
If you will Google Westerly rulers, or better yet, go right to Sew Study, you'll be able to see them on there. So I know most of you are not exactly like me cleaning this all up. I'm not that way either, but to keep everything organized for today, I want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn around here to the ironing board, and we are going to press our pieces that we're going to be using. So now there's nothing wrong with taking your iron and doing multiple layers at a time. This I have 2 layers, well I guess I have 4, so I'm going to take these and lay them across like so, and I'm going to go ahead and press those because I like to have my fabric nice and pressed before I begin to sew. Now I was watching something the other day and following along and on a Facebook post, and I read about somebody who does all of her quilting and never presses as you go, and I just about cringed. I'm sure you probably can do that, but I can't imagine that you're going to get good quality matching up and all of that. So I would encourage you to definitely, as we're pressing, we're going to be sewing here in a minute, but you want to press as you go. So this happens to be just my border pieces that I'm not going to be making any marks on, so I don't need to put any best press on that. And this is my backing piece. Now, a couple weeks ago when I was on, and maybe some of you weren't with us then, I showed what happens when I get stuff on my iron. If your iron doesn't glide real smoothly like this, the way that you can put the glide back on your iron is to take, this is one that's used, you can use it multiple times. Take a couple pieces of paper towel and lay a dryer sheet, not the foamy ones, but just those web mesh ones, and run your iron back and forth on that sheet. It will also take anything off of the bottom that's on there. And when I do that, if I had something, one time I actually got this close to a bread wrapper, if you can believe that, and that just melted all on there. And so what I did is I took it to the edge of my ironing board where it's a little bit more firm and went like that, and it just takes it right off. So if you want to put the glide back on or actually clean your iron, you can see I just keep that right there on my ironing board, and it helps you to put the glide back on your irons. So back to this, I'm just pressing this. When I come up to this crease that was in the fabric from where it was on the bolt, I'm going to show you my mister. You probably saw this before. They come in 3 different versions. This is the Iron Maiden. And the beauty of the mister is that you get a fine mist. So I'm just misting this on there to get that crease out. And while I'm finishing this, I'm going to just turn around here and get the other misters. Oh, I thought I could reach them. Well, there's one that says, quilting friends don't let friends go to quilt stores alone. And then the other one is about color therapy. They're all very cute. And again, those are available on my website, and you may have them. I always encourage you to check your local store first. I really want you to support the local stores. So check them first. If you can't get them, then you can find them there. So then I have this ready to go. I'm not going to need it for a few minutes yet. So I'm just going to fold that back up. And then this is my centerpiece of my quilt. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to press it first and get the creases out that I can. And then again, because this one's going to have marks on it, I am going to give it not 1 but 2 coats of Best Press. And again, what that does is it puts a barrier. You're not going to be able to see it, but it puts a barrier on your fabric so that we can mark it with our Frixon markers. Now, I have had people tell me that some of the Best Press is leaving like a stain on their fabric. I can't say for sure. I've not had that happen, but I always use the scent-free because that's the one I like the best. I'm kind of an allergy person, and I don't like to have any of those scents. So I've not had any of the problem with it. Obviously, the scent-free is also color-free, so that may make a difference. Now I've got that one ready to go. I'm just going to lay it over here, and I'll be right back to the ironing board. I'm going to go ahead and press my 4 little squares, the same thing, give them a little shot of this. Because I will be making marks on it also. Now while I'm doing this, because you can just watch while I'm doing this, let me talk a little bit about piecing. When we piece a quilt, anything that we're doing in this particular project, we are not going to be stitching over any seams. But when you get going with your templates, you're going to probably be stitching over seams. You're going to have a quilt that, like, say, is a block of the month. Megan, you want to show them up there, that quilt? You can see that's a block of the month quilt, and if we were using that with templates, we're going to be going over a lot of seams. And to make that easier, you can use a lighter weight thread when you're piecing, so your seams will then lie flatter when you are pressing. So when you're doing that type of quilt and piecing, let's get used to using maybe like a 60 weight thread to piece with, because then the seams will lie flatter. And that's why most of the companies will say a scant 1/4 inch, because they know when you stitch, you can't get it back laying as flat as it was originally. So now we're going to go over here to the ironing board. Oh, not the ironing board, the sewing machine. And I'm going to lay my pieces out here to the side. And this is one of my border pieces. And I have my centerpiece. So what I'm going to do is I cut these both 16 1/4. I'm going to put the pins. When I used to teach home economics in classes, I always told the kids to make sure they put the pins where the things matched up first and then work in between. So we know these ends are going to match up. And if you will put your pins perpendicular to the way you're going to stitch, we're going to be stitching along here. Put your pins in perpendicular to that direction. Obviously right sides together. And you can see that after I press this, I have a little bit of a difference there. If you will put the one that is baggier on the bottom, we call that baggy bottoms, then the feed teeth will help to pull that in, and it will not be greater when it gets to the other end. It will work that in. So some people have always just tried to start without pinning, and they start at one end, and then whenever they get to the other end and they've got extra, they don't know what to do with it. So we want to work this in just by letting our feed teeth work for us. Now, I have brought over here a little bit of a scrap, and we're going to just call this a starter piece, okay? And I've put it so it's about 4 layers together, and each time I start to sew, I'm just going to start out on that piece. So for those of you that have had your machines kind of eat your fabric up, this is your solution. I've got my 1/4 inch foot, I'm lining that right up, and so now when it begins, it's going to be just taking off easily. I'm going to take out that first pin, and I'm just kind of going to take my fingers to make sure everything is easy. And I'm going to tell my machine to stop with the needle in the down position, because that will act as a third hand for us. We don't ever want to sew over pins. Not that it's hurting anything, but it does kind of damage your fabric and your pen when that needle comes down and hits. So as you can see, we're working this right in as we go down that seam. So there's no extra gap now. The feed teeth have worked in that extra fabric, and everything ends up even. Now in this case, I have a cutter on my machine, but I'm just going to go ahead and raise my needle, raise my foot, and pull this out so that I leave just a little bit right here. So you can see that that has joined on. There's no puckering. I've got my little starter piece. I'm going to get over here and get my snips out, and I just snip that off. I set it back down. I'm going to set my foot back down on it. I'll start again. And now I'd be ready to pick up for the other side. So I'm going to turn the piece around. I'm doing opposite sides because we'll have to sew the cornerstones on the other 2 pieces. So again, if you have a directional fabric on this, you're going to want to make sure that you've put it in the right direction. In other words, you might have like snowmen on it, or you might have little Christmas trees and you want them going a certain direction. So I'm going to make sure that I have that. This fabric is not directional. But you can see our little baggy bottoms is ruling again. So I'm going to leave a little bit of that bag in each of the sections so that my feed teeth will work with me to pull those in. I often get asked, how many pins do you put in? Usually I say it's like 1 every 4 inches when you're doing something like this. Now if it's something that you really have to match up, you're going to have more pins than that. So you can see we just get started. I'm going to tell my needle down. I pull out that pin, make sure this is lined up, using that 1/4 of an inch foot. You can see we've got a little bit of bag left there, but it's going to work right in because our feed teeth are going to help us with that. There are a lot of little sewing hints and tips that you learn along the way, and I really like to share those so you can have the best sewing experience as possible. So I'm going to raise that foot, pull this thread over, and so now I've got both of those on there. So while I'm still here at the sewing machine, I like to do all of my sewing that I can do before I take off and go over to iron. So at this point, I have 2 more pieces left. And so again, I'm going to stitch through my starting block. I'm going to take one of these, and at each end, I will be putting a cornerstone. Again, if this has a direction to it, then you definitely want to line that up. Now I'm going to get that started, and then I'm going to put this in, because that's only 5 inches, so I really don't need much more than that. So I've got that in there. I'm going to let that pin go, and I've stitched that. Now if you're used to what we call, I call it production piecing, other people have different names. We don't even need to, chain piecing is another one of those. We don't even need to cut that thread in between there. We can just continue on. Now at this point, I can either bring this one around, which is easy enough, or I could stop and cut them. I'm just going to bring this one around. And production piece or chain piece right through there. You notice I didn't even put a pin in that one because I could hold my finger on it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this from this end. So now all I have to do is go back, and I'm going to trim that off, trim the space in between there and here, and cut off our starting block. So I now have 2 pieces that are going to be my border cornerstone, and I have the one that's the center. So we're going to turn around here to the ironing board. And something that many people don't know about, and that's what's called setting our seams. And if you will just leave it like it came off of the sewing machine, doesn't matter whether it's this side or this side, but press that seam first before you try to do anything else. This is called setting the seams. Press that way. And I know in this case, we press to the dark, so this is just going to be pressed out like that. So you can just take your iron. We don't want as much ironing motion as we want up and down. So I'm just putting the pressure right there. You shouldn't see any kind of a little flap over. You want that good and flat. I'm showing you this way so you can see that that's still nice and flat on the back. So if you set that seam first, that will make that easier to do. Now I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to leave this back flat like so, and I'm going to set that seam. Just allow the heat to get right down into your seam, and then you're just going to be pushing this back, and I can take the edge of the iron. Because I've set that seam, it just cooperates so much more with you. Now I'm going to lay this aside, and get this piece. So these, we're going to set the seam, but in this case, we want to think about how that's going to mesh up with the real center there. So since I pressed the centers, well, let me show you again because it's kind of confusing. Since I pressed it to the border, then the next one, when I join it up there, I want that seam to be on this side. So I'm going to press it away from the light again so that it will join up smoothly. So when I set this here, I've already set that, but I'll show you how I did that. Then I'm going to take this and press this seam towards that dark. So can you get close enough in there so they can see that the seam is towards that dark? So when they mesh up, they will lay nice and flat. You got one more to do. Do we have questions? Comments? I hope I'm showing you some new things here.
There was a question about what your table was that you used with your machine.
My Sew Steady table. That is an extension table. It's from Sew Steady, one of our sponsors. And I happen to be using the Quilter's Wish table. It's wonderful because we use what's called table polish on it. It's an acrylic. And it allows my fabric just to glide right across my table. Now in this case, I'm going to set this back this way so you can see that, and then I'm going to come out in this direction. All right, I'm going to lay this right here and get my front to show you that I'm going to put this right together. So you can see that when these two go together, they just lay right in there, so you're going to get a great join at that spot. We're going to pin this down here. We will pin it at the opposite end. So we're going to go back to the sewing machine. And now that we're back here at the sewing machine, I'm going to put a pin right in that seam. You can see the seam there. I'm coming up to this edge, and I'm going to put a pin up there. I will come down here, and because again, the way we've pressed them, they will do what we call nest right together. And you want to make sure you get your edges exactly even. And then back here in the middle, this is about 16 inches. Remember, we cut it 16 3/4. So we probably want about 2 or 3 pins in here. And again, baggy bottoms. So if one has a little extra, it's going on the bottom. So I'm going to get my starting block, put my foot down, stitch through that. When we come to the end of it, what it's doing is it's holding our threads and everything, and I'm just going to start right out, and that way it doesn't take your fabric and make a messy first start. Now I'm right at that pin, and you'll notice that it kind of bunched up there just a bit. I'm just going to press this so it's at the pivot point and push my finger right back under, and you saw how it just went right underneath there, and now I can continue on. I'm going to take that pin out, make sure that I'm laying this nice and even. You'll notice how I'm using my left hand over here on the side just to keep everything going smoothly. Make sure this lays back.
We have another question about the table. How often do you polish it?
Great question. My answer is usually, oh, you'll know, because it won't be as smooth and it won't slide. But I would say that probably every project when I start a new project. And you'll see next week when I start to do my quilting with templates how much more important that even is, because it just makes our templates move so smoothly. If I take this fabric, you can see how it just slides across this without any effort at all. And so it makes piecing a whole lot easier. Now, another question?
There was another question about that. They noticed you didn't have the glider on.
Well, I'm not quilting. So I don't use a glider when I'm just sewing. That's only when we're doing the free motion with template quilting.
And one last question. That Donelle has an older sew study table. Can she still use the polish for that?
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
if so, how can she get the polish?
Again, you can check with your local store to see if they have the Sew Steady products. If they don't, it is available on my website. We're hoping that you will be going to your local quilt stores and telling them about these projects. They could be teaching these projects in their store as well. And encourage them to check us out. Give them the information so that they can check us out. I was looking for my little starting block. You can see I'm so used to it. It was still attached. So I'm going to start sewing through that again. Come to the edge of it. And I'm going to put my foot right up on my fabric. Needle is down. And I haven't pinned the whole thing yet, so I'm just letting my needle hold everything in place. I'm coming down here again to get these two pieces to nest right together. And I will tell you a little bit about the table that makes it so wonderful. If you don't have a sewing table, or you're sewing on your dining room table or something like that, your fabric is not going to be able to glide across that as easily. And that's what the beauty of this is. You can take any table and make it a sewing table by having a Sew Steady extension for your machine. And the Sew Steady custom cuts every single one. So when you order one, it's custom cut for your table, or for your machine, I should say. And so every one is going to fit nice and smooth. You can see that there's no cracks around here. And the tables have leveling legs on them. So those legs level so that you can get this nice and smooth. So even if you were on a table that had kind of warped a little bit, a real table, a wood table, that had kind of warped a little bit, you could level those legs anyway because of the fact that they all have the leveling feature. Now when we get finished with this part of it, we are going to go press the same way by setting our seams. It's so important to have good seams, if it's supposed to be 1/4 of an inch, which this one is. Everything on this was set up so that when we get ready to do our borders and our designs next week, they will come out exactly where they're supposed to be. All right, so I've gotten clear through that. I'm going to take my cutter. I've got my little trimming scissors here, and I'm going to take off that little starting block. And as you can see, we just use it over and over and over. So now back to the ironing board. So I'm going to go ahead and press this to do what we call set the seams. And in this case, then we're just going to lay this back and press this back flat. And would you look at that corner right there? When those are pressed right so that they can nest, they'll be nice and even. So your points will match right up, or not necessarily your points, but your seams will match right up. Now again, lay this back so that I can set the seam. I use this just right down there, and you notice I just kind of wiggle it back and forth so it gets it nice and flat. And this one was going to come towards me. And again, We've got a good point there, a join. And you'll notice that I don't have any puckering or anything, even though it looked like one of those borders was longer. Everything worked its way in by allowing our baggy bottoms to be on the bottom. And because I know how much marking, I'm going to give this one more bit of best press because I'm going to be marking inside to do that design. Now, depending on how experienced you are with your templates, you could actually give it a try to use some metallic thread. If you want the look of shine but you're not ready to give it that metallic thread yet, you could use a polyester or a rayon that's going to give you that shine like an embroidery thread would. So I'm going to leave this lay here for just a few minutes, and we're going to go back over to the main table here. And I'm going to move my ruler rack over to the side so I can lay my backing completely out. And I'm going to take my batting piece and center it. Now, if the backing is 30 inches and this is 27, that means we got 3 extra inches, so we should have about 1.5 inches all the way around. So I'm just going to lay this so it's close to 1.5 inches all the way around. And you know how batting is. It kind of has a mind of its own, so it might be a little longer in one place versus the other. I think I need to move this just a smidgen. But this is what I like about this particular type of batting. You can see that after I just kind of press that in place with my hands, right down here, I'm going to pull this back. You can see when I lift this up, there's kind of a resistance. So this is laying nice and flat on there. And what I'm going to do is just lay this back halfway. Now I'm going to be using the Quilt Basting Spray by June Taylor. And I would normally, I'm in a big room right now with fans, but I would normally have this so I was doing it outside or in the garage. But this one has not got a lot of overspray or anything, so I'm just giving it that much. I recommend you put a mask on. I tested that and I couldn't talk through it so you would have understood me. So I just kind of turned my head while I did that. You can see when I pull this back, right there is where I stop because now I can't pull it any farther. And I'm just going to give it a couple little sprays there. And I just start from this side and push it back out. I've tried several of these, and this one seems to have the least amount of, number one, overspray, and second, it doesn't have all of that nasty smell and what seems like it's doing you harm. So I've got this laid out nice and flat now, and I'm going to get my top back here. And again, I want to center this because remember, I'm bringing my back to the front for my binding. So I want to make sure that I've got this so that I've got at least my 2 inches all the way around. So I'm going to take my measure . 2 inches there, 2 inches, 2 inches, and I want this to be on there square. I don't want it to be so that the backing is not going to be on straight of grain. So I am good there. So this is all laying nice and flat. And again, I'm going to take this back pull this forward and smooth it out. And I'm going to rotate this around. And when I lift this up, you'll see it stops right there because that's where I stopped with my spray. Now what we're going to need for next week is to know where dead center is on this particular block. Now I still have like 16¼ inches if I were to measure this. Yep, 16¼ So what I'm going to be doing is, you want to hand me another long ruler there? I'm simply going to take 2 rulers and butt them together and hold them as one, and I'm going to go from corner to corner. So when these are butted together, I mean, I know some people that even take a piece of tape and put on them, but I can hold them there. I am now going to take one of my markers and I'm just going to put a little line in the center this way. And then I'm going to go the other way, butt my rulers together, match up that corner up here with this corner down here. Now you want these to stay butted together, and I'm going to cross that so I can tell exactly where I've got my crosshair square there. So while I'm at this point, I'm going to get that crosshair square because you can have that marked for next week. So we're using our 8-point crosshair square. We're going to set it right down in the center so that where that intersection is, and we're going to square it on there. Now again, you could take and you can measure that to see if you've got the same on both sides and that it's straight. I like to use my ruler like this, so I've got this dead center. So again, I'm using my tools, and you can see right here when I do that, it's a little narrower, so I'm just going to shift it just a smidge. So now I've got that straight, and I can take and I can just mark. You only need to mark out at the ends. We don't need close up. So I've got that marked just like that. And then what I'm going to need for next week is to have this as a perfect 4-inch square. So right down here in this corner, I'm going to use my ruler. I've got a 4-inch line here. So all I'm going to do is take and loosen my screws here and push this up to the 4. I'll turn it this way. I'm trying to get it so you can see it. I'll turn it up to the 4 and tighten that, and come down here and do the same. And now when I lay this in here, there's my 4 inches that I'm going to put right on that line, and if I count over, right there's my 4 inches. So I can just mark here and here. And so now I'll know where the center is there by again taking the ruler and going like so. So when you go from corner to corner, this will be our center. Because when we turn our edge around, which we're going to show you that quilt in a minute, but when we turn our edge around, it will come right up to this line right here. So we want it centered in this square that we've just drawn. So let me do that one more time here, even though I need to do it 3 more times. I've just taken my ruler, I've put it on the 4-inch mark. This is the 4-inch, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Draw along this edge and that edge. Take the straight edge of the ruler and just come to the center and make a straight line, and the center and make a straight line. And you're going to do that on all 4 corners so that we will be ready to start stitching next week. Now, I'm not sure that I showed you the actual templates, so I'm going to get those out and show you. This is what this looks like, the Spinifex 14. And this is one of them that we're going to use. This is the 9.5. And this is the 3.5. No, I take that back, 5.5, which we're not using. That's why it doesn't have its tape on it. We're going to be using the little one. The 3.5 is what we're going to use, and that will be used down here. And then we're also going to be using the 11.5. So you'll want to have your templates. If you have them, you're going to want to put the stable tape on them. And next week we're going to be doing our quilting for this. And I want to take a second here and show you the other quilt, the one that's completed. And then we'll take some questions. So when you look up close at this, I don't know how much this is going to show up, but you can see the photos on the website. I've actually created an interesting little border using this same template. It's really a pretty little ribbon type border. And as you'll notice in the corner here, we have the little design. I'm going to show you how we can match all of those up, because these right here can tend to be a little bit difficult. And the same works on the big one. We want to get all of these so that they match up. In other words, they complete up here at the top. So, pulling this back, this is that faux border. The backing has been brought around to the front. We have a perfect miter here, and then we stitch it down by machine. I don't really like to do hand stitching if I don't have to. And so those blue lines that I made on the one we're ready to do for next time, this is where this will turn right up to that edge, and that's why we wanted to center this in there. So do we have any questions?
What pen were you using again?
Okay, this is the Frixon Colors marker. It is not what they call a color stick or a pen. It is a marker. So if you notice it, it is like a felt tip pen. I'll put it down here on the white part so you can see it maybe a little bit better. And it marks very easily. It's not going to come through your fabric. It's not going to get down in there into your batting, and so we don't have any problems with it ghosting or coming back in the cold weather and all those things that we've heard that's happened from some of those pens.
Another question, for those that tuned in late, where can they get like the supply list and some of those directions that you mentioned earlier?
Great, I'm glad you asked. The supply list is 2 pages long. This is what it will look like. And if you go to this website, I've got it a little bit larger on here, you can download that supply list. It's also on Sew Steady's website, but I have the supply list there, I have the templates there, I have the kits, because we do have kits. If you don't want to make up your own kit, you can get the fabric and the batting in a kit. Now, I did not add thread because everybody has their own preference on thread, but you can use a lot of different varieties of it. I used red because I thought the design ended up looking like a poinsettia. It doesn't have to be that. So you can do whatever you want for it.
And Brenda is asking, is the quilt time the same for next week for the Facebook Live?
Yes, it will be at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. We will be doing the quilting next week. And you will probably have a little bit of homework. In other words, we may get 2 of the corners done and you'll have 2 left to go. But we want to make sure that you know how to do the borders. I will have a handout with drawings so that you can do that. If you'll just have everything pieced like this, ready to go, you should be able to quilt along with us. But now remember, you don't have to. These are all archived. You can just watch us and ask questions and enjoy. That's probably the way I would do it, and then do the project later, because obviously you're going to have to collect some of the supplies. You're going to need to get your Spinifex 14, one of our new, oh, I pulled that out, I'm sorry, one of our new sets of templates. I'm really having a lot of fun with these. I think it's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 are the new ones. That may be 12 through 16, I'm not sure. But you can see those again on Sew Steady's website. If you go in and go under the search and just put Spinifex on there, you'll see all of the different types of templates that come with that. Any other questions, comments? We love hearing from you. I do read all the comments. I try to answer everything that I can. We do encourage you to share this with your friends. You may want to get a group together and hook your little computer right up to your TV and sew together. Have a sew day together. Create your own little sewing group. It's really a lot of fun to do that. And since these are all archived, you can do that, or maybe you want to get a group together at your church or something. But having a group of sewing friends and quilting friends is always something to look forward to. And if you are a store owner or you're teaching a store, remember you can get these kits from us and you can get them in quantities to teach. We encourage you to look at the one we did just a few weeks ago. For those of you that are just joining us, this is the project that we did, and you can see I'm using mine. I've got my tools and everything in here, and we used from the sampler set the clamshell template, and we also used the Spinifex 36. So this was a fun little triangle caddy that we made, and as I've traveled around since then, I found a lot of people have been following us on that, and they have their own triangle caddies, and some of them have put their own spin on it. I had one lady who put a trim all the way around the edge and some designer buttons and just all kinds of fun stuff to make these their personal items.
Kathy has one more question. Can you use the polish on the acrylic insert of a sewing machine cabinet?
Yes, very good question, Kathy. Kathy asked if we can use the polish on the acrylic on the sewing machine inserts. Yes, you can use those that are acrylic. You can polish those with that also, and that will help that to glide a little bit easier. I know some of the tables that come with some of the machines have a texture to them, and so there's not a whole lot of advantage. You could give it a shot, but those tables that are textured are really never going to be able to slicken up, so to speak, because they have that texture on them. So, but yes, that's a good question. So if there are no other questions, I definitely want to thank our sponsors again. That's Westerly Designs, SewBiz, June Taylor, Aero Cabinets, who's giving away this great cutting mat. Definitely want to comment to win on that. And Sew Steady, of course. They are the ones that put this all together. Really want to thank them for this fun opportunity to share with you my love for template quilting and quilting in general. And we will be giving away something each week, so stay tuned and don't hesitate to ask your questions on here. We'll do our very best to make sure that we get answers to you. So if there are no more questions, until next time, enjoy your time with your templates and your sewing machine, and get ready to be back 2 p.m. Eastern Time next Wednesday for more of our Christmas in July Quilt-A-Long.